Not here to defend himself.
That's the way we like it.
That's the way we roll.
Hey, YouTube. This is BUB'S Comics coming at you with the No Faces Comic Chat. Today we are Roger. Do you remember who we are, or you probably didn't have time to look at all that, did you?
No, I didn't have time today.
All right, we're the back in town Batmen. Why not? We are Sans DS Comics tonight, who is probably watching or listening or catching the rewind in an undisclosed location in a bunker. He's currently being investigated by the FBI. We'll just put it out there. Let's tell the truth on this one, because they're probably watching now. So if there's anybody else out there you want to go the way that DS Comics has gone for the night, then I don't blame you. But you know, that's how it is. So we miss him, and we'll catch him back next week. He should be returned as assuming that he gets the rest of the evidence buried tonight. So
you know, you really missed your calling. You should have been one of those conspiracy theorists.
Who says I missed it, my friend?
Yeah. What pseudonym do you go under for that? I wonder.
Actually, it's pretty close to the same. It's just Bub spelled backwards. So there you go.
Well, that's everything. That makes it crystal clear.
So of course, I have with me as always Roger. Say hi, Roger.
Hi, greetings, everyone.
Nice. I always try and get you to not say greetings by telling you to say something else, just to see what you'll do.
Yeah, but you see, I know that you know that I know, so that's why it always works out.
Oh, I thought that. Yes, I did. I tell you, I don't know that we've done a chat just the you and I.
I don't think we have.
I know DS and I did one, maybe two. I think just one.
No, because there was one. I wasn't set up yet here in Mississippi, so.
Oh yeah, that was like a 3-week hiatus for you. Bless your heart.
Yeah, that was tough.
Yeah, we got in the chat JPL Flash. He was there waiting at the door when we showed up. We've got Rayman the Silencer Man. We got Area 51 Mike. Good to see you. We have Discovery Bay Comics. Thanks again for the promo this morning. He's got a new intro to the promo. I really like 90% of it. The 10% missing is us. But you know.
Well, he did mention us, but not in the promo. He did mention us in the body, though.
Yeah, we didn't make the AOK video that he got sent, which is pretty awesome, by the way. That's a pretty neat thing. So glad to have you here. Glad you could make it, JB. And then, of course, we got Comic Book Gallery saying hello. Hello. And I think we've got all that squared away. So I'm glad Mike's in the chat. I was going to mention, you know, I go to the topic tonight is kind of cons that we go to and kind of our experiences meeting. It doesn't have to be cons, but our experiences meeting creators. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I'm kind of, I don't say looking forward to, but I feel like my comic collecting will have a natural end because just the type of person that I am, I feel like I'll probably do this for a number of years. And then when I feel like I have at least one copy of all the books that I really want, then I'll more or less pare down and settle in with that collection. And by then, something else will already be kind of gnawing. And my guess would be is that it'll be figures and statues because that display is awful nice too. And, you know, some of the creators of these comic books, especially the covers, they have they're commissioned for art pieces as well. And sometimes they just translate exactly like a cover stance or a photo, you know, and then turn that into a statue too. So it gets pretty cool. So it could have its own other life of collecting. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. It you know, you evolve as a collector. I mean, even within your hobby, you can evolve within ages or within your likes of stories and artists as some come into the industry and others that retire. So collecting is a very evolving and a dynamic personal journey. Really, throughout. I've been collecting really since I've been about 11, and there have been jumps and changes in focus. Many times I collected for, coins for a while and stamps, paper money, things like that. And again, it segues into something else, but comics have been pretty much consistent, maybe not to the extent that I have in certain periods of my life, but comics have been consistent love. And I don't think that ever goes away. At least for me, it has.
Well, I was talking to my wife this morning, or maybe I should say I was talking at her. I don't know how much is really received versus just thrown in her general direction. Uh, but but we were talking this morning about how much I've enjoyed collecting comics, and one of the reasons, there's supposed to be some bad weather coming in tonight and tomorrow,
Mm-hmm.
and we were just talking about how this hobby I've enjoyed. I've had other hobbies. I played golf for a while. Don't do that as much anymore, but that's very seasonal, obviously. My area, they don't have indoor driving ranges or anything like that. Also, I have done, I was riding a bike for a while, like cycling, and I enjoyed that. But again, very seasonal. Can't do that in the winter. And, the one thing is like if I wasn't golfing at that moment, then there was really no way to enjoy golf. And if I wasn't riding a bike at that moment, there's really no way to enjoy riding a bike. Whereas comics, I can take 2 weeks off from buying comics. Not that I would, but I could. and if I did that, I would still have so much to enjoy, because creating a collection is a whole different type of hobby, so much more so than an activity that you would do. So this hobby has an activity, of course, the hunting and the buying and, going to conventions and getting signatures and all the fun parts of that. But then it also has an aspect of afterwards, it has this reward element that is, ongoing and hopefully everlasting. So I really enjoy it.
And the reward element, I'm glad you brought up that point, because that also can sort of be a moving target. Because most of my comics, as you know, I've picked up, either off the stands or out of the cheap bins, and back then they were worth nada, nothing, zero, zippo. And today a lot of them have good value because, again, just because of the longevity you are as a collector. So that part of the dynamic of collecting is what's, to me, is really exciting, because you never know next year what's going to be valuable at today is worthless. And that's one of those aspects of collecting, especially comics. I mean, cards, when I collected cards, that really rarely did that really enter my mind. But comics, because of the fact that the characters have been around for so long, baseball careers, end after 15 years or so, but characters can have lasted, some 80 years. And that, to me, means that there are always hidden gems out there. There's always something to hunt. There's always something to find. You never really can find, you can never say there's nothing else for me to do. You can end it. You can, artificially end what you're doing, but there's always an aspect of collecting comics that is open to everybody, unless you own every comic ever. And I don't think anybody does that.
No, and even if you did, you'd probably upgrade and have signatures and are they slabbed and all this other stuff too. I mean, it's an infinite well of things to collect and add to your collection, which is good, I think. I'm a completist in the small term. I like to complete my meal, but I don't have to eat all day every day, right?
Right.
You know what I mean? So like, I like to complete a run. I like to complete, a select group of comics that I'm after, or complete a list of comics that I'm after. But that doesn't mean that I have to, own every single comic, or I don't feel like I've done anything,
Right. Although there are collectors that are, you and I have, like you said, we have a finite limit to what we will collect, right?
Yeah.
But there are collectors out there. I know two of them that are rabid collectors, and they do want to get everything from certain companies. I mean, there are very few Archie completists. I mean, I've never heard of one. I've never met one. The only person I know on YouTube who actually seeks them out a lot is Shannon from Solid. What's his YouTube name? Solid. Uh, he's a bass player, so it's like it's his bass, whatever that is. Solid back end something.
Oh,
He's the
really?
only one I know who actually seeks them out. But there are very few Archie collectors out there, and that is arguably the third best company longevity it is. But they just don't have the variety of comics that Marvel and DC do. But there are rabid collectors of DC and Marvel. I know two. I know one
Oh,
DC and
yeah.
one Marvel guy, and they
And
want to have every single thing that they've ever done.
The X-Men runs are so hard to, people, some of those books are pretty well printed, but there's so many people out there that have a goal to collect every X-Men comic, especially the main run, like Deadpool 2323 did,
Right. Right.
you know,
Yeah.
and there's so many people just frantic for that. And I think that basically they look at it that they could spend $50 on every one of those comics. And as long as they did, eventually they'd have them all. Like, cause that's what it seems like, cause they way overpay. If it's the one book they need to complete a storyline, they'll just overpay for it. I've never seen anything like that with any other titles, but those X-Men collectors, they're nuts.
Well, Spider-Man too.
Yeah.
That's another one that if AF if Amazing Spider-Man 14 is your last issue, you know you're
Yeah.
you're you're probably going to have to overpay it unless you want to be very patient and hope something falls through. But not too many are going to. Not too many ASM 14s are going to fall through.
No.
So yeah, I mean
You mean
you're
Amazing
right.
Fantasy, right? You're talking about
Uh,
Amazing Fantasy 14?
well, Amazing Spider. I'm talking the first Green Goblin as an
Oh,
example.
okay.
As an example. Well, AF-15, forget it. I mean, that's. But you can say, well, you can say to yourself, well, that's not Spider. That's not Amazing Spider-Man. That's another title,
That's
right?
true. That's true.
But come on, we're splitting hairs. It's Spider-Man number one. I mean, that's the long and the short of it. They changed the title right after, right?
Yeah, and
Um,
that's the thing that gets me is that when you're looking at um, characters like that. So you can be an X-Men completist, but if you really want all those X-Men, chances are Hulk 181's on your list.
mhm.
There's not a good chance that that's going to escape you.
Yep.
So I guess all I'm trying to say is that the people that are collecting those large runs like that, it's not like that's all they're collecting. Most of the
Right.
time they're collecting that, or they may be focused on that, but they're also picking up a bunch of stuff along the way.
Or if they originally started saying, "Oh, I'm just going to pick up the X-Men Uncanny X-Men later on run," they may start that way, but then there's a crossover. Okay, well, I better start get that crossover. Well, now I'm close to all the characters. Let me get another character, and then you branch. Listen, comic collecting can be a deep rabbit hole if you take it to its extreme, And
Yeah.
I've been down it a little bit because I originally I originally only started with about 10 or 12 Marvel titles, when I was in 1974, and I was focusing on those, right? But then what happened? Oh, well, the Avengers Defenders War. Well, I got to get now Defenders, right? Right? Oh, Defenders. Oh, hold on. Doctor Strange is in that, so I got to get Doctor Strange. Oh, so you see what I
Oh
mean? You
yeah.
can take
I've
everything
been
to a
there.
logical extreme, right?
Well, that's how my collection ended up the way it is now. Although I've thinned it out some. I started off. I found, was it the limited series for Wolverine? I found his number one, and then later the same comic shop was selling a bundle of the first 35 Wolverine books
Mm,
in his original, in his first regular title, first volume,
yeah.
and it was like $50, and included number one, but it was missing like a couple of the keys. So I was like, well, I'll just grab that and start reading. And then I got to the point where I was ahead of myself, where I was reading, but I didn't have a book to get. So I was worried that I was going to run out. I was like, oh man, I'm not going to have anything to read. So then I started picking up stuff that was filling in gaps. And then I figured eventually when I got to that book, I'd just pick it up, or, hopefully I'd have another run where I wouldn't have to worry about buying a book. And I got to the part where Wolverine loses his adamantium. I want to say it's Wolverine 75.
Sounds familiar. Yeah.
And well, that has a big crossover, right?
Right.
So with the hollow foil on the covers and
Yep.
everything, has a little card hologram on the card. So
Yep.
then I was like, well, I can't keep reading because I haven't read the crossover. It was the first time I had really come across a crossover in this new phase of collecting, right? So I said, oh man, what am I going to do? Well, I better go get those other books. So I got the X-Men. The X-Men was 25. And I said, well, I
Mhm.
can't read X-Men 25. I haven't read X-Men #1. So then I went back and collected everything. I stopped reading Wolverine so that I could collect every X-Men title from 1 to 25 so that I would be able to complete the arc and read the books in the story arc.
Mhm.
So that was the start truly of the sickness. Like that's where it really began, was when I hit that first story arc and I said, well, I can't read this. I have to read all of it before I can read this. And oh well.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm with you. Listen, and I bet you everybody in the chat probably has a similar story. Maybe some exceptions to that, but yeah, to me, I mean, if you're a completist like you are and I am to an extent, right?
Yeah,
And
we
I
create
like
our own list, but then we
we
want to
create
complete it.
right. I have my own parameters for that, what that means, right? And
Yeah.
so, like, if I get really interested in a character like Warlock, I want to go back and get all their appearances. So that's what
Yeah.
I did during the 80s, since I was volunteering at the comic book shop, and I also went to cons and shows, things like that. So I would hunt down go through the Overstreet, look what his appearances. What This is pre-internet out there, guys. Okay, we had to really do a lot of homework to get appearances. And I would search them out, and that's how sometimes you end up with some good stuff, like my Werewolf by Night 32, yeah, Fantastic Four 66, 67, things like that, because I just wanted to take the character. And back then, the keys were not the keys were more Silver Age and Golden Age. Bronze Age keys were kind of an oxymoron. There were very few, maybe ASM 121, 122, something like that, but very few. So it was like open season on all these appearances. And when I found them, I picked that up for probably $1 each or something. So, that's how I determine my completeness, is by character, not necessarily by title. Although, again, I went down the rabbit hole. Oh, I've got most of the Amazing Spider-Man. Let me just get the rest of them, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. I guess that's how it happens probably for most of us then, is you just start, you dip a toe in that water and then all of a sudden you're up to your neck. So,
Right. Right. No, you dip a toe and you say, well, let me put the foot. Well, I got the foot. Let me put the ankle. Let me put the knee. And all of a sudden your whole body, and pretty soon you're drowning.
yeah. Yeah, I kind of reached that drowning point a couple months ago, and that's when I kind of started switching over to just kind of key focusing,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Yeah, I
a
noticed
couple of
that. Yeah.
runs. So, because collecting every book ever out there is just exhausting, and I do like to read them in order, so I don't generally read the book unless I've read what's before it, or at least that bulk of the story arc. Um, so that gets a little daunting too.
Oh, Bub, that you and I, in that sense, we parallel, because I did for years. I mean, for years, I didn't finish my Defenders arc because I was missing like number 28 or something, and I was already into the 50s, and I'm dying to read this, but I'm like it's
Stay
kind of an
strong, right?
OCD. Yeah, it's an OCD thing, right? I mean, it's not logical, right? But I'm holding out, and it took me at least 4 or 5 years to find one. It's just one of those things back then. If it wasn't in an LCS, it wasn't a show, you're out of luck. Pretty much.
Well, I
So
think
I'm with you. I know exactly what you mean.
before the trades really became a thing as well, um, there wasn't a whole lot of availability. Most people, I don't think, were expected to catch every comic that came out. That's a bit of a lofty expectation for a kid, really, to never miss an issue.
Well,
So
before LCSs, yeah, that's true.
yeah, well, even so, it still was a lot to catch them all. I mean, surely there were a few that you would miss here and there, and they wanted to make the titles accessible for new readers too. Now there's all this #1 craze, but back then it was much more common to just pick up a book that was labeled some number whatever 156, and here you go. Who are
Oh
these
yeah.
people? And just like it used to be the beginning of most comics, the splash page, and maybe the first couple of pages would be a quick rundown of the superhero and their powers, or how the team, a 3-line blurb of how the team comes to be, or everyone's in the first speech bubble of each person. They mention the name of another character, so that you're picking up all the names,
Yep.
and you're able to read it without really a whole lot of backstory. I really forget. I wish I could remember who it was. I want to say it was almost Jim Shooter, but I can't remember. But someone had said, one of the editors, I believe, had said, hey, someone had made the comment, well, comics can be intimidating for people because they pick up a comic and it's 150 something and they don't know what's going on. And he had said that, if we're doing our jobs, that shouldn't be a problem. And I agree with that, because the better comic books really do ease you into the story, and what's going on. You can miss a couple of issues here and there and still pick up and carry along and enjoy it.
Yeah, that was a common thing. You're right. At least maybe not every issue, but I would say about every year you would get an issue that had some kind of a synopsis, or at least a flashback. So it would kind of get you caught up. Of course, the stories, they weren't they had continuity, but it wasn't like you had to know everything about the character. They sort of eased you into it, that you got to know the character little by little. His backstory was eventually going to be told, right? And so you're right. I mean, there was a little more of a soft blow when you would start in any given issue.
Yeah.
But I don't know. At some point in the 90s, things got really ridiculous.
I think it was when they started dragging these storylines out. It used to maybe I really enjoy, my favorite comics are always the self-contained issues where I open it up and the story is complete by the end. And maybe there's a tease that the villain will return another time or something. I'm good with that. Or one little shoelace string out there still left behind. I'm good with that too. But the bulk of the story, I like to be contained in one issue, and it doesn't have to be a 64-page special to do that, So,
right.
I like that. And then small story arcs, 2 books. Once the story arc goes past 4 books, I'm already not real happy with that.
Right.
I prefer it to be more succinct.
Right. Well, that pretty much was. And especially in the Silver Age, you rarely got anything above 3 issues. Some JLA crossovers with like the JSA, things like that, would go 2-3 issues, but rarely over 3. Rarely. Bronze Age, I think there were 6-parters here and there, but most of them were 2 to 3 parts.
And well, in the 90s is what really started that what now story writing. Mm-hmm. Whereas prior to that, there was a story we were going to tell. Here are the characters we want to introduce, and it may take us only 1 book to do it. It might take us 3 or 4 books. Or there's an event, and this is going to be a sprawling event across, multi-titles. I'm good with that too, although that gets a little out of hand sometimes too. And thinking of some titles that span 35 books, or every
Secret Wars 2 was one of those.
Yeah, with all the tie-ins,
Yeah, Acts of Vengeance, things like that. Oof.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those were rough.
And so for me, when the 90s came around, it was more like sitcom writing. Like, all right, we have all these characters and we put them all in this book, and here's the opening situation, and then we'll just see what we want to write next. We'll write this, and then tomorrow we'll say, well, what did they do today? Well, they did this today. Well, what are they going to do tomorrow? I don't know. We'll worry about that tomorrow. And it just seemed like there was no actual story being told. It was more like, here's another chapter in the days of our lives with these comic characters. Now, there are some 90s comics that would stand out as not doing that necessarily. But even then, they would have long arcs, 10-issue long arcs. It's like a little much for me. And modern comics are very much like that. It takes 12 to 20 comics to complete the story arc now. And it's rare that one comes through that's fantastic, by the time you go that long.
That would drive me insane. By the way, we have a great chat in here today, Bub. A great chat.
We do. We need to recognize him. It's been.
Let's see. We got C. Wood in here. McD. McD is not feeling well. He's still checking us out. PFP all the way from Puerto Rico. Pages, Films, and Plastics. We got, of course, Area 51, our Canadian brother over there. Mr. Unknown Comics Guy. Hey, I don't think have I seen you before? Great to have you.
I know of his channel. I've never seen him in the chat before.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard. Great to have you. I mean, Ray is here, of course. I mean, the flea market guru.
RLM's Comics and Collectibles.
That's Russ. Russ is he just hit over 300. His contest just closed or is closing. And I think he's gonna do a giveaway here in a few days. I mean, we got some superstar. Pope is in here. Pope Cerebus at first.
Pope Cerebus, and he teases me. I think he teases me, but I always say like Pope Cerebus. So that's just when I see it. That's how I read it.
Oh, Simon Comics popped in. Rangersley. Okay, Rangersley. Okay, this guy. If you think I am knowledgeable, I am a microcephalic compared to Rangersley. This guy knows things that I don't even know how he knows them. He doesn't do videos, unfortunately, but let me tell you, this guy is amazing.
Bitbiter 0101. I met him at a con. I have a little like BUB'S comic shirt that I wear to cons sometimes.
Oh yeah,
and I was wearing it, and he stopped me and he said he had seen my channel and he was there. I think I might have even bought a comic or two off him. I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah, and I'm gonna sub him up here. Because I hadn't seen him before.
Yep. I don't know that he makes videos or not too often, I guess I'll say.
Biggie Shack is in the house too.
Wow.
Great YouTuber.
Nice.
Great YouTuber. Man, we got some really thanks, guys. I mean, you guys are awesome, man. I mean, thank you for checking us out. Okay. So Rangersley says blushing. Rangersley, no need to blush, buddy. You are amazing. Every time you do a post, I read it and I learn something. So trust me, I appreciate you. Please do videos, man. Knock our socks off.
I love it.
All right. So what did you want to talk about today, Bub?
Nothing much. I just wanted to chat about, meeting creators and stuff like that. Sometimes it works out really well. Sometimes it doesn't. This past weekend, it's true. This past weekend, I met Marv Wolfman, right?
Yeah.
So I got him to sign a few books. And what's so funny to me, there's his signature on Crisis of Infinite Earths, number 7.
Favorite issue.
Oh, that's a good one. What's so funny to me?
I cried.
Oh, Roger. Do you need a minute?
Maybe an hour. By the way, it's Ranger Sly. I apologize. Ranger Sly, not Rangersley. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. That's all right. Look, in Pope Cerebus, the first says he calls me Cerebus, and I do. Pope Cerebus. Well, it's one of those things where, you saw the comic on the rack. That's a comic no one talks about in my, general comic circles. No, I had never heard it spoken out loud. So I just read it and I was like, I guess it's Cerebus. Actually, I take that back. The first time I heard of Cerebus was from Pope Cerebus the First.
Really?
And from his name. And I was like, Pope Cerebus the First. I was like, wow, that's a really unique name. That's cool. And then I was in a comic shop and I saw a Cerebus comic or Cerebus, right? And I say how stupid I am sometimes. My first thought was, I wonder if he knows there's a comic with his name.
Oh man,
what did I do?
He's probably a fan of that arc that he did where he was, they kind of lampooned like the church and the Pope. So I think that's where he probably got his name. And that's, I mean, listen, back then, and that was an independent comic, right? Because Marvel and DC would never taboo, they would never do that. But Cerebus, they would even Wolverine, Wolveroach. You've heard of that, right?
Oh yeah,
yeah. So they would lampoon. They would make fun of everything. I mean, Dave Sim he didn't care. He made fun of everything. Marvel, DC, Pope, doesn't matter. He just had fun with that. That was like just an off the wall comic. Yeah,
there's a new one out there called say new. I'm just recently becoming aware of it. Parody Press, and they do they lampoon comics now too. Like I think their newest one is Ven Dumb or something like that instead of Venom.
Right.
It's Ven Numb, like like numb to the touch. It's Ven Numb, yeah. So a lot of crazy
maybe
stuff.
It's Venom and Jean-Claude Van Damme, that they get them both at the same time, you know what I mean?
He's doing Tostito commercials now. I mean, how much further can you fall? Like, is that even worth getting plastic surgery for at this point? It's like you go to your doctor and you're like, hey, doc, hook me up with a new face pull. I got to go do a Tostitos commercial. Like, I can't imagine they're paying him enough. What are they paying him in jars of salsa? Is he just living off the stuff? I don't know. Just, I don't know what's going on in this world. So yeah, so I met Marv. So it's funny, like they were blowing up Instagram, they were blowing up Facebook with his picture over and over again, saying, "Hey, come on and meet Marv Wolfman." And every picture, this guy is smiling ear to ear. He's a nice white-haired, white-bearded, plaid shirt wearing gentleman. Looks like the kind of guy that would either serve you lox and bagels in New York or possibly teach you a history lesson in high school. He was that guy, like brown corduroy with brown loafers. But then, and smiling, right? And then you met him, and although he was still looked the same, he was not smiling. I don't know if he wasn't having a good con, but I walked up to him and I said, "Hey, Marv, this is." I'm sure I should have said Mr. Wolfman, but
hey, Marv.
Yeah, but he was like, he says, "Oh, hello." I said, "Hi, I've got a few books for you to sign." He was like, "You'll have to take them out yourself." Like, yeah.
Wow.
Like, I know that, give me a sec. Let me reach in my sack here, pull out my books. And so I'm getting the books out. And then he's like, that's $5 a book. How many do you have? How many do you have? How many do you have? I was like, well, the way he was acting, I had brought about 10 books. And I was like, maybe just 5, because the price, my willingness to buy more goes down. So then I was like, okay. I was like, well, just these 5. And I said, if you don't mind, I wanted to ask you a couple questions. And I said, a good friend of mine, Roger, he's stuck in the, conless region of the country right now.
Pretty much.
And he had a couple of questions, and I thought they were really good questions, if you don't mind me asking. He was like, and he's like looking around. I was like, it's not, anything major. I just have a little YouTube channel. He was like, yeah, everybody's got one of those. I was like, okay. I said,
maybe he was talking to Neil Adams before or something.
Maybe it was. He was like the Neil Adams of the
maybe there's osmosis between creators there. I don't know.
It could be. And he, again, I'm not knocking the guy because I've always been a believer that he charged $5 a piece. I've always been a believer that I like people for what I'm supposed to like them for, and I don't need anything else. So, right. Some people are like, oh, I don't like this singer or that singer because they act like a jerk or they do this or do that. I'm like, but if you like their music, that's really all I'm buying. I'm buying the music. I like the music. You may not be, it depends what they're selling. I mean, some people are selling multiple things. You got like Ariana Grande, right? And she's selling her voice and her physical image, I suppose, and if you don't like her voice, then you just watch her videos on mute and maybe you'll enjoy that. Okay. But she's still selling either one, right? Or both. Right. But, Marv Wolfman didn't put his picture on the front of every comic, and it's really just his writing. So I can enjoy, he can be a jerk, and I still can enjoy his writing. And he wasn't a jerk. He wasn't that bad. So anyway, so I'm just saying, I'm not knocking him. He can be however he wants to be. But I did get my questions asked, and he did answer them, although some of the answers were a little snarky.
All right. I'm waiting.
All right, give me a minute.
Did you tell everybody that that I sent you questions beforehand to ask?
No, go ahead. Tell them what happened.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, you texted me that you're going to the con and that Marv Wolfman was there and that you wanted me to, you asked me about certain comics to sign. And I said, hey, and then you said, hey, I wish I was there to ask him some questions. And then you said, oh, well, I'll see if I can ask him for you. So I hurriedly put up like maybe 5 questions, Bub, something like that.
Yeah. And what was funny was they came through. So first I had texted, hey, any particular question you'd like me to ask? And then Roger goes dark for like 10 minutes. And I'm like, well, I guess he didn't want me to ask any questions, or he must have got busy, whatever. Sometimes DS will go dark for like a week, after he asks you a question and you answer it, he just goes dark, like he's taking a survey for the census. And you're like, okay. Oh, boy. So you never know, people got schedules, whatever. Right. But then, of course, the deluge of text came down. was more than a screen filled of text. I was like, oh, he was just typing that whole time.
Oh, Bub, let me admit something to you into the chat. Okay. Oh, Comic Night. Great to see you here, buddy. Let me admit something to you. I am sort of glad that I wasn't there because I get like so panicky and nervous around creators that I admire that I just flub it every time. And I'm not normally like that. I'm usually a fairly cool customer, but I panic. I like when I put a DC comic in front of Stan Lee. I mean, I was mortified, So I'm glad that you asked, because if I was there, I would have been like, like that.
Well, I was going to try and get it recorded. I had all my recording equipment with me, and I was going to go ahead and do, at these small cons, you don't really have to have a press pass or anything. Basically, if there's no one in line, you can stand and talk to them as long as you want, until they shoo you away, until the creator shoos you away. So I was going to go ahead and record him and everything, but he didn't look like he was going to have any of that. So, so I just said, okay, that's fine. So the first question I asked him, these are all Roger's questions. I didn't ask any question that Roger didn't ask, because I was worried that these were already going to be too much for his personality to handle. So the first one was,
sorry about that.
Oh, you're good. Oh, and when the text came in, they came in jumbled. Like they didn't come in the order that you typed them. So I had to kind of repiece them together. So I hope I got the questions right.
Okay, I hope so.
Yeah. So the first question was, how do you manage to transition to thank you, Bub, for doing this for me? And so he was a little perplexed by that. And he looked visibly hurt by the question.
That's probably what I would have said if I was there, by the way.
All right. Oh, really? All right. What I really asked was, how did you manage to transition? And actually, the next word was Blade in Tomb of Dracula. So I figured out that wasn't right. So how do you manage to transition from fandom to working with DC?
Yeah.
So of course, this was the first question I asked. So this kind of set the tone. I was hoping to get a real inspiring story. And instead, he looked at me like I was an idiot, and he said, "Well, I'm pretty sure that all people that work in comics were fans of comics first." I said, "Yes, I would agree." I was just asking about your personal journey, how you managed to get in there. And he's like everybody else, I just send in submissions, and when you're good enough, they'll take you. I said, okay. So, and I had not talked to anyone that gave me a response like that since Neil Adams. So maybe the artist and the writer, they go walk hand in hand.
The reason I asked that question is that he had been done a lot of writing for fanzines and comic clubs and things like that, and he was a big fan of comics. And then one day, I see his it's like I didn't hear about how he got discovered. You know what I mean? He just one day I see him, writing a comic book. So I was wondering if he went to a con and he submitted something and they said, "Oh, this is pretty good. Well, we'll call you back," or something like that. That's what I wanted to know.
Well, I know, Roger. It was a good question. It just didn't turn out to be a good answer.
Yeah, that was
and to start it off. So then the next one, and I already knew. So okay, if he didn't like that one, he's gonna want a whippier question, right? So the next one was what was your inspiration for creating Blade in Tomb of Dracula? So instead of just going right out with that, because I was worried about him, so I kind of said, so what was your inspiration in making Dracula, and how did you know he was a hit? Like, how did you know this was a big deal? Give him another question so he could answer either one, right? However he felt like it.
Give him an L.
And he said, well, I was on the book, and you got to make new characters. So, but he said, when you are writing a character, you kind of have a feeling that it's special. Something about the character is good. It feels unique, and it feels like something that you haven't read before. So it's going to be good. And you hope people like it as much as you like it. But if you like it that well, chances are a lot of people will like it too. So he actually gave a pretty good answer to that one.
Yeah. Okay. I agree. I agree.
So that was cool. Then I asked him, oh man, I think the next question I asked him was about Dracula, because this was all okay. Was it a challenge to write such an iconic character like Dracula, which had a rich history in prose and film? So he had told me that I asked him that, and that question he liked. And he said, well, I've never had seen Dracula. He said, I had never watched any, he had never seen Dracula in a film in any way whatsoever.
Wow.
He had never read any of the poems and other short stories that had been written about Dracula. He had read the original, book. That's it. The original novel. That's all he had ever read.
The Bram Stoker novel.
Yeah. Okay. He had read Bram Stoker's Dracula, and that's it. And he had not even read that like right before he wrote the books. He had already read that in his history of reading.
Right.
And so his approach was to ignore everything except the main characteristics of Dracula and what little he could remember from the book as far as his origin, and the rest he just made up as he went along. And he wanted it to be a completely new take on Dracula from his perspective. And if he happened to cross over with what other people had done, then that was fine. But he basically wrote the character as if it was a brand new creation.
Really? You see, that is surprising. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Because Pope, I was going to say Pope just had a video where he completed his Tomb of Dracula run, really high grade, by the way.
Yeah, I know. Makes me sick.
It is sick. It is, but it's taken him years and years of upgrading, I'm sure. But when you read Marv Wolfman, the series, especially like after the first few issues, he has such a grasp on that gothic but troubled yet conflicted character, and I thought that he had studied the character in depth, and including there's some writings that Bram Stoker had done because he was thinking of making a sequel, and he had notes out there that are speculative that those were his notes. And that character was more like that, my understanding, more like the Tomb of Dracula character, because originally he was more of a monster, but like with gothic undertones, women being under his spell, things like that. But this character had a lot more depth to him and a lot more complexity than that Dracula. So I'm surprised. I mean, that just tells me how impressive a writer he is then. I mean, just the creativity that he has.
He's one of my favorite writers for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's tell you what else I asked him. It's just two more. So then I asked him also, what inspired you to resurrect the Teen Titans after leaving Marvel? And so I did that a little different. I didn't want to mention him leaving Marvel because I was scared at that point that it might bring up some nasty memories, right?
Right.
So I left out the leaving Marvel part, and I just said, so what made you think of bringing the Teen Titans the way you did, And he said, well, it was a title nobody was doing anything with, and I wanted to introduce some new characters. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, why not bring in some fresh, ideas on the characters that we already had and give them some new people to interact with and make some great stories that would be a standout story at DC as opposed to just, taking over a title from somebody and continuing on whatever they had started. So, that was a good idea.
That's a very good answer.
Definitely worked out.
Yeah, what happened? Well, obviously you didn't say about the Marvel thing, but obviously something happened. I believe that he wanted to take a character in Marvel a certain direction, and they said no flatly, and I think he got upset about that. And so I think that sort of opened the door to go to DC, and probably he had asked, hey, is there something I can do over there? And he had a vision, right, that he wanted to do. Right. And of course, I mean, I think that James is had to go for a bit, but I think he will agree that once Marv Wolfman and George Perez took over the Teen Titans, this was a super hot title back in the 80s. I mean, super hot. I mean, I'm trying to see, of course, back then a hot title would sell in the hundreds of thousands. And whenever I remember, whenever a Teen Titans issue came out in the comic book shop, we had to be like careful because people would start picking up 2, 3, 4 of them, and even though we had the pull list, we still had the extras. So that struck a chord. He knew at that point in time, what the comic book community wanted. And I think that kind of foresight is somewhat lacking today. I mean, today and in the 90s, it was lacking also to a certain extent. Because he just knew how to infuse characters with a backstory, with the right type of angst and the right type of conflict to be able to relate to the reader at that time. And that is the Marv Wolfman, to me, the stamp that he made on his comics, that he could do that.
I agree. He did it with both heroes and villains.
Exactly.
There was a duplicity to every character that when they were on stage with each other, the hero was always the hero and the villain was always the villain. But he had a way of monologuing them outside of the combative portions of the book that gave you sympathies and empathies with the villains, and then gave you a little bit of question and doubt with the heroes as to whether they were going to be able to complete the task. And that gave so much more weight when they did come together to fight or battle. And then of course, mixed with, fantastic art never hurts that. But, having that feeling that there's more at stake here, because in the end of the battle, most of the time the winner wins, the loser loses, right? It's very binary.
Yeah,
but
cut and dry.
Yeah, it really is. But having all that rich backstory just leading up to those battles was enough to make you feel like, well, the winner won, but did he really win? Or is there going to be repercussions from this? Is there going to be more to the story? And just great, just a great writer. I loved his work on probably my first long exposure to him would have been his work in Werewolf by Night and Spider-Woman. And those are two titles that I think the writing on those really stand out for me.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned, by the way, Ranger Sly just added something here. Again, I told you, this guy's amazing. He says, because remember your question from me to Marv Wolfman, he says, if he recalls correctly, Marv Wolfman got into comics because he was a fanboy who often visited the offices of DC and Marvel with his friend Len Wein and some others. So editors came. Why couldn't he have said that?
Exactly.
Right? I mean, thank you. Just like, why couldn't he? What's wrong with that answer?
I don't know.
Nothing. I mean, I don't get it. But thank you, Ranger Sly. I thought I had heard something like that. But thank you for confirming that. I lost my train of thought. What was I going to say? Oh, Werewolf by Night. Yeah. And you love that title. I love that title, right? Because again, once it becomes Werewolf by Night, he doesn't have any dialogue, right?
Not hardly. So, it's very
But he has thought balloons, I guess, at some point.
Yeah, he has thoughts. Yeah. But usually they're animalistic, like, I just want to get out of here. I just want to get to the jungle. I don't remember who this person is, but I know that they hurt me, so I'm going to hurt them. Stuff like that.
Right, but remember that, right? Because think about that. The way that he is attaching this character is exactly the way that one would think. If you're going to turn from a rational human being to a beast, then your thoughts have to be, again, modified, less logical and more instinctual. And Marv thought of that when he wrote Werewolf by Night. Yeah. And if you look at the flow of the stories, that is kind of the trend that you see. I mean, when Jack Russell, he wanted to avoid those. At one point, he only become werewolf at the 3 nights of the full moon.
3 nights, the month, yeah.
Right, And he had like and I think I'm not sure if on the first night or the last night, he had a little more rationality to him than the full night. And those little nuances came through in his writing. I mean, that was brilliant. Like you said, it was a three-dimensional character, not just, oh, he's a beast here and he's not here. No, there are so many shades of gray in there, and his behavior, it was commensurate to what the changes were in his physical being, due to the curse. I just thought that was brilliant stuff. I really just thought that he nailed that character so well, unlike any other before.
It could be that he didn't want to tell a story like that. I'm talking about, him kind of hanging around the offices, meeting the editors, and maybe he would prefer, when you're in an industry, when you're outside of an industry, to people like us, that sounds very amazing. Like, oh, that means even I maybe could have been a writer, or, if given the right place, right time, it could have been me. So I think we like to think of things that in that respect, but perhaps for him, that could have been something that he had to deal with from colleagues, telling him that he wasn't really as good as he was, and only because he was a friend of the editor did he get the job. It could have been that he had to suffer a little of that while working, and maybe he's a little sensitive to that version of his, origin, as opposed to him just basically saying, well, I got it on merit like everybody else, which was a very odd answer to me, especially now knowing that there's a much richer story there,
Yeah. I mean, I could understand that back then he would have been sensitive about it, but we're talking now 40 some years after this occurred. I mean, do you think anybody's going to say, oh, so you're saying, listen, Marv Wolfman has no need to tell us how he got in. The fact of the matter is he was a brilliant writer. And
I agree.
That nobody, I don't care if he is, a dragon breath, with flames coming out of his mouth. That stands on his own. Just like Neil Adams is a brilliant artist. I mean, he may or may not be a jerk, depending on what day you see him. But there's no denying the man could draw. The man knew about texture. He knew about depth. He knew about perspective. No doubts, and that stands on its own. You said, you'll judge them based upon the factor in which you're there.
Yep. Well, why am I a fan of this person? It's for his writing and only his writing. And I want a signature on this book that I got on the Teen Titans, because he wrote it and it's great writing, and I wanted to see his signature on it. And his signature was kind of pretty, so I was happy with that.
Yeah, that is a nice signature. Yeah, that is a very nice signature.
Talk for a moment about Bob McLeod. I've never shown this before. This was an original sketch that Bob McLeod did for me. And I say it that way because a lot of people will say that I had Bob McLeod do, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I really didn't have him do this. He was sitting there and he was drawing. When I came up to him, I was getting another comic signed by him. And it really wasn't a big deal. I was just going to bring up a comic to get signed. He was in a long line of other creators. And he was doing a Wolverine sketch. And it looked amazing. And I asked him, are you doing that sketch like for someone else? Or is that, he's like, no, I'm just doing this for myself. I was like, oh, wow. He was like, yeah, I might keep it or I might sell it later when it's finished, but it's not finished now. I was like, okay. So in other words, don't ask to buy it. And I said, oh, wow. I said, well, do you do commissions? He was like, yeah, I got some time today. I'll do you. What do you want? And I was like, well, how much does it cost? I don't remember how much he charged me for this. I think it was like $25 or something. And, yeah, and I said, I don't know, just something Wolverine, anything. Your Wolverine looks great. And he was like, well, it's, $20 for a head, well, I think he said it was like $30 for a head, and like, if you want the bust, it's this much and that much. I was like, I really don't care. Whatever you do would be fine. And so he did this, and I walked up, picked it up, and he's like, yeah, $25 will cover it. And I was like, oh, wow. And he was super nice, just a really nice guy. So, and that's someone I didn't expect to meet. I mean, I knew that I'd be there, but I didn't think it was going to be like meeting him and getting something done and everything. And it was super awesome. And he did a fantastic job. But I always keep blanks with me when I go to cons, just in case something like this were to happen. And this is the first time it's really happened. But yeah. I mean, I always keep them there, but the price list can be kind of high for most of the better artists.
Yeah, but
So
$30 for that's and
I only
Bob
paid
McLeod.
25, and he was only going to charge 30. And well, it was supposed to be just pencil too.
Oh,
But
and
then,
he ate it. Huh?
well, yeah. And I told my wife, I said, I know these artists, if you give them more time, they'll work on it longer. They'll keep picking it up. They'll keep adding to it. I
Right.
said, if I had brought this to him at 8 in the morning and then didn't pick it up till 10 at night, it had been a whole scene, with background and all kinds of stuff going on. Unless he got another commission to do in the meantime, he would just keep picking it up and working on it. And we were kind of stalking him. So, like, after he was working on it, I would find little spots around the con where I could get an eye of sight to him to see if he was still working on my book. And as long as I saw him still working on it, we didn't go anywhere near him. I said, come on, we'll walk around. We'll go this way because I don't want to interrupt him. And I don't want to say, yeah, this is good enough. It's done. Nope. Give him all the time he wants.
Oh boy, the nuances of con etiquette, I tell you, or at least when you want something done. Like, oh, by the way, I wanted to talk because I think you said that you wanted us to talk about us meeting creators and cons and so
Yes.
forth.
Yes.
And since you're talking about Bob McLeod, by the way, he's a very underrated artist, very clean artist.
Yeah.
Really, I'm assuming if you're a writer and Bob McLeod is your artist, you're happy because everything's going to come through so clear and so and he's going to do what the story tells you to do, not some that go off the cliff,
Yeah.
and just
And
I don't agree with that.
I'm just going to say this real quick, and then I'll give it back to you.
Yeah.
He just because you mentioned it, he did say that one of the reasons I asked him, talking about Bob McLeod, I told him, it's really something to see have such great success, to be able to do a couple different characters and have them be some great renditions of those characters. He said, I tell you, I was really lucky in the colorist. He said, the colorist that I worked with my whole career, he said, I never had a bad colorist. And there were other, I suppose, artists or, who had issues with their colorists and it muddled their art. And he felt like that didn't allow them to be as successful as they should have been. But he was lucky that he always got a good colorist. So again, it's really not just their talent, but who they're working with. So
yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I know what he's talking about. There were some colorists, especially in like the early Bronze Age, which were really heavy-handed. And if you look deep enough and some of the panels, you can see where the color is very uneven and very splotchy. Again, you have to look close, right? But
yeah,
if you're an artist, you don't want that. You want your lines defined. You don't want them blurred, right? So
yeah,
I see what he's talking about. I mean, I'm not an expert on what colors or anything like that, but I'm assuming that I know like Marie Severin. Well, it was a heck of an art of a colorist, and she won awards for it. So anyway, I want to talk about George Perez. Now, George Perez is retiring.
Yeah.
From comics or from art, I'm assuming, altogether. He's been doing this since the early 70s, I want to say. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he's been doing this since the early 70s. So we're talking 40, some 50, almost 50. No, not 50, 40 some years. And let me tell you, this is a prolific artist. When we're talking normal artists, when they do a page, they have 2, 3, 4. Perez would routinely have 20, figures on a page, on a panel, just so detailed. And I've met him twice down in South Florida.
Oh wow!
Back in the first one I think was in like 85, somewhere in there, right around when he was doing Titans, and then one right after Crisis. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was after Crisis. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was like with it. And let me tell you, what a gentleman! I mean, I was in the line there to get his signature, and I never made it because he was talking to people and laughing and telling stories and telling jokes, and I was listening to this. I was just soaking this in, right? And you can tell a lot about a person, like everybody can have a bad day. Okay,
Sure.
everybody. Yeah, I've had them. You've had everybody had them, right? But I have every time I've seen him, and I've been to other cons where he's been there, but I've never gotten close to him. Every time I've seen him, he has been just so fan friendly. I don't know how else to say it. Fan
No,
friendly.
that's good. I like that.
I mean, and when he doesn't always have time to make a sketch or whatever, but what I remember I went on a Saturday and it was I mean he was swamped. I mean there was like 100 people there, wanting to get a signature or whatever, and everyone he didn't rush them through. You know what I mean, Bub? I have like, hey, all right, that's it. No, he took his time. He talked to them. He would give them at least a couple minutes of dialogue, if that makes sense, and what a gentleman. I mean, he even when some of the other people around him were like, hey, no, he wanted to he appreciated the fact that we were, the people that that really made him, because if it wasn't for and that's something that today is a lost art. The collector and the reader, they're the ones who make this industry. Without us, they are nothing.
Yeah.
Without our money, they're broke, right? And Perez knew that, and he took the time to appreciate everybody that, at least that in those 2 or 3 cons that I saw, he appreciated every person that came by. Not everybody was, a ray of sunshine, but he gave them time. So I just wanted to, a small tribute. If you've been watching my Avengers as I'm unfolding them here, and to me, again, he did some of these story arcs were with the champions, were against supervillain teams. The Korvac I see. I'm talking about a creator. I'm already tongue-tied. When he did the Korvac saga here, I mean, it was all the Avengers and the Guardians of the Galaxy, were together. I mean, sometimes there were 25 people in a panel, and he just nails it. I mean, perfectly. And I remember one conversation I had with him, and because we share last name, so I told him this. And I said, hey, do you know I'm a Perez too? Although I don't think he's from Cuba. I think he's from another Latin American country. And he goes, yo, yeah. And so he goes, yeah, what's your name? I go, Roger. Hey, mine's George. I go, yeah, I know who's your name. You don't understand. You don't understand. I have followed your work, since the early 70s. He goes, hey, and your name and my name have almost the same letters. I mean, can you imagine that he gave me that kind of attention to remember what my name is and to say that? So anyway, George Perez, just one of the best ever, my favorite cover artists, and a gentleman through and through. And I just wanted to say that before we got off today.
I appreciate that. And that's kind of what I was hoping, it wasn't a bad experience meeting Marv Wolfman. I enjoyed it. And again, I wasn't looking for anything more than what he was obviously going to give. But, he did eventually start lightening up and answering some questions pretty well. And it was a small con. It wasn't like, I think sometimes these creators too, he was the guest of honor at this con. He was the only creator featured at the con. And that's what this con, it's the second time I've been to it. And it's I think 3rd time having, and they have 2 a year now. And the other one being the summer. And the guest of honor for the summer is going to be Jim Shooter. And so they only bring one creator in, and that's it. But, maybe he was having a bad day, or not enough people were buying his stuff because they were walking behind him buying books. You're at a con, so people were walking up with books. But I didn't see him selling a lot of I would assume as a writer, it's probably a little tough to sell a poster, of someone else's art. That could be a little rough. But I did ask him 2 more questions. I asked him, was there any other projects that he wanted to work on? And that shut the interview down pretty much, because he said, no, Yikes. I worked on everything I ever wanted to work on. He said, no, I worked on it all. And he said, and I said, yeah, there wasn't anything that you wish you could have had, or a character that you never got to write for that you always wanted to. He said, no, because that would have knocked another writer off their title, and I would never have done that. I said,
Wow.
I said, fine. I said, last question. Too many questions? And actually, that's just what you had wrote to me.
Yeah.
Asking
Yeah.
me if that was too many
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah.
I didn't ask him that. But that was it. So, but anyway, it was good. He was a good guy overall. And the writing speaks for itself. So I'm definitely not putting him down. But, it's always kind of good to know what you're in for when you're meeting the creators. Some of your favorite, he's one of my favorite Bronze Age writers. So for me, I was hoping for that kind of George Perez experience that you had,
Yeah.
I was hoping for that. I didn't get that, but it doesn't make him any less of an amazing writer. And he
Yeah.
was kind enough even to go to a con and to sign books and to have such a reasonable price for signing too. So I
Yeah.
really can't complain. $5 a cig, I'll do that all day, or at least 5 times a day.
And I was always wondering, what do writers think of artists in these cons? Because I mean, artists are charge a whole lot more, right, for signatures normally. And writers, $5-10 is pretty much what I've heard that most writers charge. Maybe I don't know Stan Lee. I don't know what he would charge, but so I'm thinking maybe are they somewhat not jealous but upset that they don't get the credit that artists do at cons?
Well, I think they might be, but I also think it's correct. I mean, honestly, the stories are what drew us in, but it's also the art that draws us in. So,
Mm-hmm.
they say you can't judge a book by its cover, and you certainly can't judge a comic book by its cover, but you can still
Certainly not
appreciate the
nowadays.
cover. Yeah, not these
Yeah,
days for sure.
not these
You can,
days. Yeah.
you
All you
can
see is a
definitely
figure.
appreciate.
That's it.
Yeah, I mean, but think about all these people that are slab collectors, and I know we almost went a whole show without talking about slabs,
And we were
but
almost there.
we're almost there. But think about
Mhm.
all these slab collectors. They're not collecting books; they're collecting pictures.
Yeah,
It's
that's
more
right.
of an art gallery than it is a comic
Mhm.
collection. Now it's
Absolutely.
still comic art, and I'm not knocking them as collectors. I have
Yeah.
slabs, but usually the slabs I have another copy of to read in some form, in
Mhm.
paper. But now there's digital books. You don't even have to have that. So in order to enjoy the story, it's still the same writing. So I just think that the collecting trends that we see now are definitely more geared towards the artists than the writers. There's no one ripping single panels out of comics and framing them as a great example of writing.
Mhm. True.
You're just not
True.
going to see that,
True.
So,
True
but
enough.
I do appreciate the writers because I am a reader. So when I read the books, I definitely know I start getting excited. The more you collect and the more you read, you can open up the first page of a book to the splash page, and if you're going to like this book or not. You're like, wait, who
Mhm.
wrote this? Who's the editor? Who's the colorist? Oh wow, who did the interior? Oh man, this is going to be great. And you've got past the first page, and you're already excited. So
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's exactly the kind of level that I would go through. I was like, oh, who's the writer here? Oh, Steve Englehart. Okay. Oh, Byrne. Okay, that's it. Pretty, editor. Oh, Roy Thomas. Yeah, I'm down. Um, but I think few people go to the level of geekdom that I did back then. But um, yeah, yeah. Most of the people in around my block, they were like, "Hey, that's a cool cover," that kind of thing. And I would say,
well,
"Yeah, but did you read the story? Did you read what the twists and the turns and the conflict? Oh yeah, yeah, that's okay, but that cover really is cool."
I tell
Yeah.
you,
So
in about 3 weeks, I'm going to have a special thing happen, and that's that my mom called me 2 days ago, and she told me that she had come across some of my old comics. I have no idea what they are. I have no idea what they are. Now, to my knowledge, I only owned one comic technically, and the others were probably my brothers. So because they were my brothers, and he doesn't live anywhere near me, he lives in another state, and I live in another state from my parents. So when she told me that she had those comics, I instantaneously knew that technically they were not mine. So I went ahead and told her to bring them. I would take them.
okay.
So she's gonna bring those down in a couple weeks, and we're going to be enjoying those. So I'm looking forward to that. Oh, that's the hold on, it's the bat phone.
Oh, I thought it was the
Commissioner Gordon
hotline.
calling. But anyway, so that's my little story. So that we'll see how it goes in
So you have
February.
no idea. You have not. Oh, you do have an idea what they are.
No, well,
Oh, you don't.
I
Oh,
kind of remember. I know that he had some. As a kid, I read those books. Like I probably read the covers off them. Uh, he had comics, but he was older than me. So when he kind of left the house, or even while he was still there, he wasn't really fooling with the comics. So I would dig them out all the time and read them. And probably she said they were about destroyed, and I said I would take them anyway. But there should be some Spider-Man and some Captain America, circa late 70s, be my guess.
nice.
So there could be some nice. I doubt there's any keys. I mean, what's the likelihood of that? But there could be some nice books in there that I'm going to take and wouldn't be upset to have it all.
Well, you could
So
have like a first Black Cat.
yeah, you never know. It could be
For
anything.
194. In there. Oh, Biggie Shack says that's your brother calling because he heard that you were taking his comics.
He wouldn't care about him. He would just be like, I'll tell him when they get here. Maybe I'll recognize one or two that really were mine. I don't remember if I think I only had one comic and I still have it. So I was collecting trading cards back then. And it's funny, you were talking about pre-internet, comic collecting. Well, the same thing was that way for trading cards.
Yep.
You only had a limited amount of time to collect the cards before they no longer were producing them. And if you didn't get them, you had to find someone like the old-fashioned way, like keeping the cards with you everywhere you went. And if you found someone who also kept the cards with them everywhere they went, maybe you could trade. Kept all right. Your double.
I had a little satchel. A little satchel with my cards.
Yep.
Yeah. And, I took them to school every day. You never know. You never know who would have, that Ricky Henderson that you wanted. You never knew.
You didn't have one of those fanny packs, did you?
No, they didn't have those back then, bub.
Thank God.
Back then that you would have been called a expletive that today would not be acceptable. But no, you had a little section
for fanny packs. I got to tell you, if you wore one today, I think you'd get everything thrown at you your way anyway.
Oh yeah, maybe. No, we had a little satchel, like a it's kind of like a back, but you didn't put it on your back. You just sort of draped it over your shoulder, and that was it.
Yeah, and I used to just keep them in my pocket, and I would have my right pocket would have my good cards, like the ones I was keeping, and my left pocket would have my doubles. And so I would look through my right pocket whenever I was around, just reading the backs of the cards and digging through them. And then my left pocket, if I came across someone, this was the stack that I knew I could come off any of those. I would trade them. And everywhere we went, I would always buy. And it was scary, too, when you were collecting cards, because when the price started going down, that's when you knew that they were going to discontinue the cards, or perhaps already had.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, this card pack that costs, 50 cents is now only a quarter. Chances are they're just trying to get rid of them. So then you start just buying them up, asking to take the whole box with you because they weren't going to refill them anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember those days. Sure do. Yeah.
And then I went to my first con I had ever been to as an adult, because they didn't have cons when I was a kid. Not like that. And I went to my first con as an adult, and the very first table I stopped at had a complete set of these cards that I was collecting for I think it was maybe $25. I was like, are you kidding me? And I was missing 3, I think, in my collection by the time it was all said and done. So there you go. And since then, I bought another complete set for $5 at a comic shop.
Wow.
So,
yeah. True story. I'll finish with this. There was an auction that I went to. Oh, I want to say about 7-8 years ago. No, maybe not. Maybe 5 years ago. And Bub, I have never seen as many it was baseball, football, hockey, sport cards.
Yeah.
It was on a pallet, and it was about 8 feet high, 6 feet wide. That and those white kind of 2x4 boxes.
Yeah.
All those from the 70s on. Guess how much that pallet went for?
How much?
$79.
Where was this at an auction?
Yeah, this was an auction in Central Florida,
Ah,
somewhere outside of Orlando, and that's how much it went. $79 plus whatever the commission probably came up to $100 for all those cards. I wept after that because that is sad. If somebody had took the time and the years to collect all that and paid thousands and
oh, sure.
thousands, and what did they get? Not even $100 for.
Yeah.
So that market really just the bottom fell out so quickly because it mass produced, and once that happens, everybody got out.
Yep. That's how it is. And I see now a lot of like that new comic shop I have open in my area. They're
Mm,
actually dealing in sports cards too, and that shocks me. I see them buying a lot. I've never seen them sell one, so I hope that they don't get too heavy into collecting those for
yeah,
resale because I think that's pretty much a done deal.
yeah,
Uh,
that's. I don't think that's coming back. No.
no, I don't think so. Once sports figures were no longer acceptable heroes for kids, I
Yep,
think that pretty much ended that mystique about them was
yep,
over. So
yeah. And baseball used to be such a big deal. I mean, we had baseball heroes. We wanted to be, Mickey Mantle. Well, not.
yeah, they were larger
I'm
than
a little
life.
young. Yeah, I mean Reggie Jackson, the whole bit. But now
Yeah,
baseball doesn't seem to have that cachet that it used to.
no.
Seems like maybe, in fact, sports in this. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I think football is still very popular, but
Hey, do you do football? Do you watch football?
not too much. I mean, I'm a Dolphins fan, so
Oh, sorry.
I haven't really had any glory days since Dan Marino quarterbacked the team. But I do dabble. I'll watch a game if it's interesting, or whatever. But no, I'm not really a hardcore fan, no.
I started this next football season. I'm going to start up a picks pool, and the prizes are going to be comics.
Oh,
So
that's what Pro 186. He had
he's in a
a
fantasy league, and I've
fantasy
run
league.
fantasy
Yeah.
leagues before, but I burned out on running fantasy leagues. Too
Mm,
much chasing people around. The end of the year, people stop playing properly, and
mm,
it gets really kind of messy.
yeah.
Um, but I do like picks pool. You pick the winner over the spread and all that kind of
Yep.
stuff.
Yep. Yep.
And it's going to be one entrance fee for the year. You pay up front. You got your spot for the year, and then at the end of each week, there'll be obviously whoever the winner is. They'll earn a comic. They'll all be keys, and I'm going to try and do them all graded comics. And the reason for that is because I don't want anyone. I want it to be of obvious value.
Right.
You know, and if you crack the slab, good on you. Do whatever
That's
you
on you.
want.
Yeah, that's on you.
But they're
Yeah.
probably all going to be graded comics and all keys. And we'll do 16 keys for the season, and then we'll have 3 winners for the end of the season, and see how it goes. And then the 3 season winners will get the big keys, mega keys,
Right.
talking 500 to $1,000 books for those last 3 books. So if we get enough people participating, then the prizes will be even bigger. So we'll see how it goes.
Wow,
If
that's a cool
anybody's
idea.
watching this and they're down for it, just drop me a line in the comments. I'll refer back, and there'll be more announcements before next season. But I'm going to develop it this over the off season, and then it'll be ready to roll when the training camps start. So it should be fun.
Yeah, that sounds. To me though, that what makes it interesting is that you're invested at that point because you want those comics. So you're gonna study. You're gonna take it seriously because you want to be in the top three. That's what makes. I mean, that's how you can. To me, that's how you can make sports interesting. To give it a something at stake. Put something at stake, right?
It's all about the carrot you're dangling, right?
That's all. That's right. I'm the
That's
donkey. I'm the donkey, and I want that carrot.
right.
But that's the first I've ever heard of that. I didn't when Pro 186 talked because I've done fantasy football, but not paid, just for with friends for fun.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that. I was like, man. And let me tell you, there was what the first prize was pretty good. Was a slab. What was it?
I think it was Batman Adventures 12.
Batman Adventures 12, right? You
Yeah.
know, I mean, that's a pretty good prize there. I mean, for $100 buy-in, that's a pretty good
Yeah,
prize.
that's a $500 to $700 book, easy.
Yeah,
So
easy, easy.
I figure if I can get 20 people to play, maybe about $200 entrance fee.
Hmm.
And if the top three prizes are all over $500 books, and each prize along the way uh, can hit somewhere around, a hundred to $200 book, I think people will be pretty excited.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Okay, wow.
Yep. There we go. All right. Well,
There you
there's no
go.
Faces Comic Chat running over. Which
I
is
tell
funny.
you, man.
We were going to
We
say that DS Comics was the reason that we always start late since we started on
yeah,
time tonight, but now we ran over. So
yeah,
if he's the reason we always start late, he can't be the reason we run over too.
yeah, yeah. We can't. Yeah, we can only get him on the front end, not the back.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
and he'll probably watch this on replay and say, "Oh, wait till next week." Wait till
I
next
don't
week.
know. I don't know if they have internet in the bunker that he's currently being hidden in.
Oh
So
boy, he probably has a little hole somewhere with that has some kind of FiOS or something coming out of it.
well,
Because
they say he's low tech, so maybe he's just got somebody relaying him the information via two cans and a string.
I doubt he gets those comic link auctions through a can and a string. You know what I mean? I got a feeling he's a real smooth operator when when it comes to those
Yeah.
things. He's got a hundred gig with whatever. He does it with 0.001 second, and boom, he's got that bit in.
Sniper on the hill. Yeah,
There you go. There
they
you go.
get me every
Boom.
time.
1 mile down, right in the eyeball.
Oh yeah. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. Ranger Sly, not Rangers Lee as previously thought, but
Yeah,
Ranger Sly,
sorry about that.
Count Von Strange, the fourth, dropped in there at the end. Good to
Gray
see you, big
Man!
keep him busy. So
Gray Man, you come when we're off, man. What's up with that?
it happens. He didn't miss it completely, but he's close. All
right, it's 99.9% of it. Gosh, Gray Man. Listen, 7 o'clock Eastern is what is that? Midnight? No, 1 o'clock in the morning over there in the UK.
Oh wow. Well, we appreciate you stopping by. Catch us on the rewind. I know he watches the replay sometimes and comments. So.
Oh, Count Von Strange is also the fourth. Also came in.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
If we did that, we'd be on all night. We can't be.
I tell you. Yeah. Go to the West Coast chats. I'm sure those will start up pretty soon.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So thank you all for joining us again. Sorry you missed DS Comics this week, or maybe you didn't miss him, but he wasn't here. In case you didn't, he wasn't with. We missed him. We missed him, right, Roger?
We miss him. I tell you, because of course he's always got something. He's got something in store for you, Bub. He's always got something in store for you. He's always got some quip or some kind of
dry
veiled criticism.
It's a dry
veiled criticism in there somewhere.
Yep, he does. I'll miss it, but I'm sure he'll put it in the comments on the replay or text me with it later.
Yeah, but I miss him to death. That guy he's just awesome, man. Awesome. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll say bye, and we'll catch you next week on the No Faces Comic Chat. Roger, say your goodbyes.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for joining us. As I'll get out of here by saying, as I always do, be blessed, and be back.
Nice. While Roger's spending the weekend in strange people's homes on his Airbnb, I'll say to the rest of you, go ahead and read a comic. And thanks. We'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.